a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Do you struggle with subconscious beliefs and overcoming fears? Are you interested in discovering and creating a new earth? Well, on today's podcast, I have You Mastny. He is the founder of YOUuversity. He has been in the personal development and transformational space for over a decade with over 18 years of real estate development and broker experience. Aaron is passionate about collaborating with mission-driven entrepreneurs to create a new reality based on who we truly are. Aaron's deeply committed to supporting people by overcoming their subconscious beliefs with the 4-step inner alchemy process that allows people to cut through the layers of societal conditioning and reveal their authentic selves. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome Aaron.
All right. Wow, that was a great intro, Dylan. So appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on, brother, man. I've had a great time rapping and connecting with you. You know, we've had some really good one-on-one conversations, and you just seem like a dope-ass dude. So I figured we'd have a little conversation here and see if we can share some of your insights with the community.
Let's do it. I got some crazy stories, so we'll see which ones show up because, we'll see what kind of path we go down.
Yeah, man. First thing I'd love to kick things off with, one of the things you talk about is this new earth. And I think when people hear new earth, they're like, what's that? What does that mean? So can you please just talk to me just a little bit about your university, New Earth, and kind of how you came into that?
Yeah, I mean, the New Earth isn't like a new concept that I came up with. I mean, you have the New Earth by, Eckhart Tolle, and he obviously wrote The Power of Now. But that book resonated with me when I read it, I don't know how many years ago. And so, over the years, doing more and more transformational trainings and different work, like I really believe in the shift of consciousness that's happening. So Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a great book about the tipping point, which he talks about when 2% of consciousness actually shifts, the rest will follow. So it's not even like everyone, and this is my interpretation, of course, of our own realities. Not everyone has to necessarily wake up and shift the planet, but I believe that when we do the internal work and we come together as a society and we actually show each other who we truly are, the new earth will emerge in such a way where we actually, and to me, the new earth represents a place where, like heaven on earth to me, is where everyone can take full responsibility for what's going on within them and not project our pains or past traumas onto each other because we're blaming somebody else for what's actually happening internally.
I love that. And one thing is about that, it talked about bringing heaven onto earth or a new earth. Part of that is us creating this utopia. I always feel that society is a race between disaster and utopia. And it's up to us to really craft that reality, that future, whatever you want to call it, by putting that into existence through our own will, right? That's the amazing thing about mankind, is that we can think of something, imagine, and then will it into existence as long as we all collaborate together. So I feel a resonation with what you're talking about everybody taking their own responsibility to craft the future that they want or a new earth that they want.
Yeah, I refer to it as our God-given vision. And I believe we all have like a vision that we were born with. And I also truly believe we're born perfect, whole, and complete, meaning that we're like these perfect souls. We come into this reality, into this realm, and then we're written upon by our parents, traumas, teachers, bullies, whatever the case may be. And then the rest of our life actually is a coming of home of sorts, which is really just deeply and fully accepting myself, all of myself, the darkness and the light. And so many of us are taught that, the darkness is bad, or don't cry, or don't process these emotions. And if you've ever read like Power versus Force, David R. Hawkins' book, where he actually measures all the resonance scales. So even shame, guilt, fear, pain, they're just deeper, they're heavier resonances. They're not bad or wrong. But a lot of people are stuck in that purgatory and that hell because they don't know how to process themselves properly because they were never taught. So they get stuck.
That's a crazy book. And part of that, we have like a subconscious access to the truths of the universe, and we can feel it and know it if it's true. There's some things going on inside that Power versus Force book that I think is incredible. And that what you're talking about the things that we resist persists, right? And so if we resist the like, I'm a bad, terrible person, and that shame can only live in the darkness, right? If you're willing to let it go and shine a light on it and say, hey man, I know I said I wasn't going to have any Twinkies, but last night I ate the entire box and now I'm inside my bed, just sitting here in a shame pile. Right. But you talk about it and people can resonate with you because everyone's got those demons and it feels like we don't. And that's one of the challenges with this whole online social media bit, right? We look around, everyone looks like they got perfect lives, but while we're struggling,
Well, it's interesting because like, as you know, even from like when we're 0 to 7, we're like in that theta brainwave state where we're like in the hypnosis part of ourselves where we're literally absorbing, we're sponges. And like, even like the myelin in our brain cells hasn't even fully formed. So we're actually like being hypnotized to a certain extent. And it's good for like walking, talking, and doing certain things. But if our parents are stressed or we're in fight or flight, like there's nothing we can really do as a little baby. So a lot of times, even ADHD, Dr. Gabor talks about this, where it's like ADHD is not even a disease. It's just a way of a coping strategy. So coping strategy to stress. So think about it. Like if I'm coming at you or you're in a stressful state when you're a little baby, you can't fight or flight. So what's the only other option? You can cry to get out the pain, but ultimately you'll just disconnect.
Yeah.
And so we're living in a society of people that subconsciously, to protect ourselves from our own pain, the way out that people mostly choose is to distract themselves, right? They become dissociated, they disconnect, or they become addicted to whatever thing is out there that's giving them something to mask their own pain.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, you talk about flight or fight, right? So you're going to physically fight or you're going to physically do flight, but there's that one step deeper with the internal where you flight in your mind. You're like, I can't, this is uncomfortable, but I'm stuck in this physical location. So your mind wanders. So what does everybody do in an awkward situation? Especially you see it in younger days with kids that don't necessarily have maybe the social skills, or they pull out their phones and they just start swiping, right? Maybe an awkward dinner party or other things. They check out mentally out of that environment because they don't know what else to do. They're mentally flying away. That's really interesting. Let me ask you a question. So you said you have some stories that led up to this. Like, how did you become aware of all of this? Where were you at initially, right? And then that then puts you onto this journey of self-reflection, self-understanding, working through your traumas and dramas.
Wow. It's interesting because, a lot of times people think of trauma, it's like the big trauma, right? Sexual rape or abuse. And those are easy to identify. Right. And so people are like, oh, yeah, drug addict, gambling, sex, pornography, which, by the way, I had all those. So I know what those traumas are like. But there's also the smaller traumas like almost with like a small T, where it could have been situations even when like you're a baby and we might not even necessarily remember this. So, for example, like if a baby is crying, right? If you're crying in a crib, some doctors teach their kids or teach the parents not to attend to those kids. But the problem is if you don't attend to that baby's just crying. It's in a natural state of grief. It's trying to survive. It's actually, if it doesn't actually, they're not being attended to, then that baby's going to die. But by not attending to the baby, first of all, the baby thinks it doesn't matter. The baby is now thinking like its feelings don't matter. And then all of a sudden the baby is like, the brains aren't developing the same. And so when I was a little boy, I think it started when I moved from like San Antonio, Texas. I moved to South Jersey, and I was the only Asian looking. I was in all white school. There's one black girl, and I was the Asian boy. I had a bowl haircut, and every kid was like, "Are you Chinese?" And I just immediately like rejected myself. I was like, I just wanted to be a white, like Caucasian boy. And so that was like second grade. And then my first best friend, his name was Sean. I became friends with him. And here's the weird thing that happened. So his neighbor's father sexually abused his son. That son went around and was sexual with all the kids in the neighborhood, including my friend Sean. So then my friend Sean was sexual towards me. Now, when you're in third grade, I didn't understand really what was going on, but I created a tremendous amount of shame and guilt because of that situation. And then you stack my mom raising me around the Bible. So he was taught the Bible. I was taught like homosexuality is wrong and all these things. So then I just buried it. I just buried that pain. And then here's the interesting thing too. Then I got bullied. So I had all these insecurities and these fears. And like, there's this trauma resonance that occurs. So I don't know if you've ever been bullied before, but like we attract the perfect situations to try to resolve what's going on within us. But a lot of times we just continuously re-traumatize ourselves because we don't know how to process the emotions. So this is what led me to be a heroin addict. This what led me to be, do drugs and alcohol and sex and all that stuff, because I didn't know how to resolve my own inner pain.
So you're constantly training yourself as you're going through this and say, okay, I want to get out of this uncomfortable situation. And so you're looking for those types of outs. But since there wasn't a quote unquote healthy way to get out of a situation, you found patterns to cope with the issues. And because
I had some healthy patterns too. I mean, I played sports. I played basketball, soccer, lacrosse. Like those were like healthy outlets for me. I played lacrosse a little bit in Rutgers, only for a year, but then I joined a fraternity and I found drugs and alcohol and women to be a lot more attractive.
It's interesting. And I had the same with being a kid. There's this weird, adult humans, there's this combination where you want to be accepted by the community, but you also want to be accepted for being autonomous and individual, right? So you say, I want to be authentic and be who I am. At the same time, I want to be accepted. And so, for you on certain times things, you're talking about Asian, but you really want to be white. But it's an acceptable. We all step into these environments where maybe I'm not necessarily a Republican, and then I go to a Republican rally and I'm like, yeah, I'm here, please accept me, or some sort of situation. It's interesting how we crave authenticity and people to accept us, but we will adjust who we are to fit in. And I've experienced that a lot at college frat situations where maybe I didn't want to drink or whatever, but I'm around the people. I'm like, oh, well, I'm here, let's do it. And it's really hard. How do you fight against that pressure or that desire to get swooped into the energy of the crowd,
Well, I think it's like, it's in our DNA where, before even like this time that we're in currently right now, we're tribal groups of people traveling around. And so to not be socially accepted, and if you got put out of the group, you died. So it literally feels like we're going to die. So if we're not socially accepted, like you're not getting likes or you're not getting love, acceptance, and approval, right? And the challenge is, for me, I was trying to get love and acceptance and approval externally. So this is where like there's the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine. My wounded feminine was like people pleaser, avoider. Avoider is like, I don't want to deal with confrontation. There's also the victim part of the wounded feminine. And so these parts of myself they became coping strategies, right? So imagine like you're born perfect, whole, and complete. Then there's pain. And pain is inevitable. Like mommy didn't give me a cookie. Okay, there's pain. Now I'm not lovable. Mommy put me in timeout. So all of a sudden, love became unconditional, turned to conditional. So then now I have fear. So I have fear wrapped around my pain, and then I create false beliefs. False beliefs are now like, think of it as like an onion. So now I have a layer of false beliefs stacked around my fear, stacked around my pain. Then I create a facade. That facade is my personality. That's my coping strategy. So I'll adopt different, like people think they are their personality. I don't believe that's true. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about you can transform who you are based on who you truly are, not on the personality that you adopted from your pain and false beliefs. And then if you have now you have your facade, which everyone around is like putting on this mask because they're trying to hide the pain that they currently have because they don't think they're going to be loved and accepted and approved of if they actually share their authenticity, right? It's the illusion of the ego. And then you wrap it with addictions. And we all have this.
Sure.
And addictions are not just like drugs, sex, alcohol, and gambling. All those are easy to identify. It could be Netflix, it could be food, it could be whatever. But that addiction is an external part of me that is trying to cope with the pain that is inside of me. But if we don't, it's an inside out game until we go into the pain and actually experience the pain and accept ourselves deeply and fully accept all of it, the darkness and the light. That energetic force is going to stay. We embody it. It stays in our cells until we actually allow ourselves to release it.
And it seems like a vicious trauma cycle. If you're looking at I'm experiencing pain, so then I have a feeling based upon that. This caused pain. This makes me feel sad, mad, or whatever. And then you take an action to cope, and then you're upset about the action about coping, which then feeds into that negative belief, which then you try to sedate yourself with more of that, and you cycle through that behavior and that pattern of behavior over and over again. And then you got to figure out, how do I break that pattern of coping to get past the pain? And you're talking about going inside and accepting the darkness and the light. What does that look like, practical, tactical? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've been coaching people and helping people, and I noticed, like, why do people not take action? Most people know exactly what to do, and yet they do the opposite, or they procrastinate, or whatever they do to prevent themselves from taking action. And I started studying, and then I started realizing, like, the shadow, right? Like, so most people are like, we're afraid of our shadow. Like, we think like we can't. And so it's interesting, because here's what happens. Like, when, like, the amygdala, like the crocodile brain within us, it's there to protect us, to survive. But the challenge is, when we're kids, it's trying to protect us, because our brain is just an instrument. It wants to run effectively. So it'll take painful situations and then it'll bury them. It'll actually subconsciously push them away. This is why it gets tricky, because then all of a sudden, as we get older, we still have these things in us. And then all of a sudden we get triggered. And then we immediately think that the other person is triggering us, but they're actually judgment. Think about judgment. I judge myself, I judge you, or I judge a circumstance. Judgment is a camouflage for what I'm not deeply accepting within myself. So because I'm not accepting myself for that particular situation, I judge somebody else because that's easier for me. It's actually a reaction, but that person is actually illuminating the part of myself that actually wants to be resolved. There's a law called the law of compensation. The law of compensation basically talks about how it's a return to love. It's a return to wholeness. And like the law of forgiveness is actually taking responsibility for the emotions that other people have put inside of me. Forgiveness is I take responsibility. Once I take responsibility for it, I can resolve it within myself. It no longer has me. It's not that I forgot the situation, but I know energetically it doesn't trigger me, and it doesn't own me anymore. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What's interesting is taking responsibilities for the feelings that I'm feeling, no matter what is coming at me.
For the emotions that other people put inside of me. So think about your parents for a second, right? Mm-hmm. The only reason why those things were put inside of you was because they weren't in alignment with love for themselves. They were out of harmony with love, right? So because they weren't taught how to process their emotions and feelings. And a lot of times, like my parents, my mom and my dad, my mom worked, my dad was a pilot. They were never home, but they loved me. They were taking care of me. But because they weren't home, what did I make up about myself, right? I don't matter. I'm not lovable. So then what do? I try to go out into the world and try to prove that I'm lovable by people pleasing other people, right?
Yeah. 100%. And then, though, the triggers that happen, when you get triggered by a situation, because there's a deep-seated belief that in some way, shape, and form that's somewhat true, which causes those spikes of behavior. And that's just the story that we're telling ourselves. So if someone hits your hot button, so for me, when I was young, I had a lot of insults on my intelligence. You're not smart. You're not this. So when someone said something to me about that, said, "Oh, you're not smart," I'd freak out on them and go, "Oh, you don't know." And I'd overcompensate and overreact, because deep down inside, I had this deep belief that I'm not smart. I'm not worthy of, which is, goes on, I'm not worthy of love and all that jazz. But that for me was my trigger, my deep, thing that I had to be aware of, and saying, oh, it's really me not believing that I'm smart enough, me not giving myself that, me not accepting myself for who I am and being worthy in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of times our addictions are just overcompensating for the things that we were never given. So then we just go and try to find something to fill that void. Unfortunately, it's unfillable. Because you can't fill it outside of yourself. That's why it's got to be an inside out game. Yeah.
And I've always noticed that there's two fuel sources with anything that we're trying to do, right? There's the slow burn, takes a long time to unpack, but will get you there. Let's look at sugars versus fats, right? Sugars versus fats, right? You could have fats and it could be a slow burn energy. Sugar's quick spike, right? In terms of positive reinforcement, the slow grind on that, or negative spike of intensity, right? They both are fuel sources. The negative emotions a fuel source, the positive emotions fuel source, the fats a fuel source, the sugars are fuel sources. They'll get you there. But if you consume too many of those quick, rapid burning fuel sources, you'll burn up. And it's not about rejecting it. It's about understanding how much should you take in, because you can't live on fat alone. You can't live on positively alone. You have to be able to switch those different fuel sources based upon your intentions, not just based upon your trying to compensate for every situation in life.
Well, it's interesting because, so if you think of ourselves as like our right brain, left brain, right? Left is logical, like masculine, right is like creative and feminine. Usually we default to a certain strength of ours, right? Some people go like super like masculine, like do. Some people go like super feminine and like kind of just like go down the emotional waterfall. But the what I've learned is like we have all of it. We have wholeness, and so it's harmonizing our brains. And there's a science between, in my interpretation of God and science are one. It's not like one or the other. And so even the yogic practices, there's a science to even just breathing, right? So and I do a lot of breath. I've been doing breath work now coming up on a year consistently every single morning. And I literally the other morning I was sitting here just breathing into long deep breath, 4 seconds, letting it out. I literally felt like I was shooting heroin, like I did 20 something years ago. And I'm like, holy cow, like it's always been within me. But because I wasn't present to it, because I was always looking outside of myself and I wasn't even in the moment, I would lose the moment, right? Addiction is about, I'm afraid of this moment. I'm not okay with the moment. That's why I'm trying to get out of it. But my freedom is in this moment, right? So it's a crazy game we play with ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Addiction is I'm afraid of the moment. And what that means is I don't want to be here right now. I need to be distracted with, it could be food, drugs, entertainment, social connections. I don't like this moment. I want to be out of it, versus just embracing this moment and marinating in it, knowing that you will be okay and this too will pass and you can accept this moment. But it's so much easier because we have access. I don't want to be here. I'm going to go Grubhub some food or whatever it might be. We're so one click away from solving that pain versus being in that moment. Can you talk me through a situation, or sometimes people logically understand this concept that, oh, you just got to be in the moment. Can you talk to me when you have that feeling to go one way, like you want to go shoot heroin, or maybe something a lot less than that. You want to go distract yourself in some way, shape, or form, and you feel it. But then how do you mentally walk yourself to taking the better path where you embrace that moment?
Yeah, it's interesting because even just yesterday morning, I woke up and I wake up early to do my practices, my meditation. I do this 4-step process with myself now. I've incorporated it into my daily routine. And I woke up depressed. I woke up like sad and depressed. And I'm like, wow, like interesting. Like and I used to tell myself like, oh, I already resolved that, or I already worked through that. This shouldn't be there anymore, right? And I've come to understand that actually when these emotions and these feelings actually present themselves, it's actually a blessing, because it's just showing me that my body is actually ready to release it. It's bubbling up. So it's actually at the surface. Now, because a lot of us don't want to deal with the pain of it, we'll push it down, we'll repress it, and we'll kind of just or bypass it. I mean, sometimes it's so easy just to bypass things nowadays. And if you look at life is basically one big distraction to try to take us away from our pain. Like everything is literally there to try to grab our attention away from ourselves. So once you start to understand, and I teach this process, I teach people, I'm like, this is the last 4 steps that you're going to need to learn, because there's one that's called the healing basket. And I learned this technique by his name's Dr. Pratt. And he did this with 45,000 people. And he noticed that there's 7 core limiting beliefs. I'm not worthy. I'm alone. I am bad. Like we all have these. Like none of us are like special to like where we don't have these limiting thoughts and beliefs. But unfortunately, they're subconsciously buried within us. So once there's the law of sequencing. So first is like I identify it. I go into it. I'm like, where else in my life has this shown up? And I go into the experience. Once I go into the experience, then I have this little simple meditation where I just call it healing. I put it into the basket. I separate it because most of us think it's tattooed to us. So we think we are it. We think I am unworthy, right? I am worthless, or I am alone, like all these things. And all that's happened is those have been imprinted upon us because of all the situations that happened when we were younger, or like even like, we were dumped or something happened. And so I go into it and then I clear the subconscious. Now I'm ready to repattern. And with repatterning, it's like I deeply and fully accept myself. I am lovable. I am worthy. But if I don't empty the cup, there's the story of the monk and the truth seeker. And this, I could attest to this because I went to Nepal and went to Tibet and I did all these things. I was always searching the world, running around the world trying to find myself.
Mm-hmm.
And all the transformation crap shit that I did, hundreds of thousands of dollars I invested, I go, the one thing I realized was like, all there is this moment, is being present. Everything just brought me back to this moment. So the situation where, you know, I was traveling around trying to find myself, and then I just came to understand, I was like, wow, everything is right here, right now, being present, being like accepting myself for what is going on right now, because life is, I don't even have to try to find myself. Life is going to reflect back to me exactly what needs to be resolved within myself. Like the law of attraction is like, everything in my reality is exactly what I truly desire. Now, some people are like, well, why would I want my boyfriend or girlfriend to cheat on me? Did I really attract that car accident? Consciously, no. Subconsciously, though, which is like 95% of our life, yes. We are attracting everything subconsciously. And going back to that story about the truth seeker and the monk, there was a truth seeker that traveled the world to be enlightened. Did you ever hear the story?
Maybe, but go on.
All right. So there's a truth seeker that traveled the world. He wanted to be enlightened by this monk. He finally finds the monk. Okay. So the monk is like, he's like, hey, can you enlighten me? And the monk's like, all right, come on in. Let's have a cup of tea. So they go in, and the truth seeker just starts going on and on and on about all the things that he's learned. He's like, I've learned this, I've learned that. And he just keeps talking and talking and talking, so much so that the monk finally gets up, he gets a cup of tea, he starts pouring the glass. And the truth seeker is going on and on and on. And then finally the tea is now overflowing. And so much so that it actually goes onto the table and gets into the truth seeker's lap. And the guy jumps up and he's like, hey, what the hell? Like, my cup is full. Yeah. And then he was enlightened. So the challenge is, most of us have our subconscious. We're so full consciously. We're trying to tell ourselves our subconscious doesn't accept it. It just rejects it. And so there's no space. We have no capacity to actually create something new.
It's interesting because there's two pieces here. So the first is, one, I mean, a lot of people hear these things and you've heard this not common, but you hear this knowledge like, oh, I've heard that before. But are you living it to a deep level where you're actually practicing and doing it? No. Well, then there's obviously a gap between you hearing the information and there's a deeper wisdom to you actually practicing the wisdom and living the wisdom, where you can understand it fundamentally on a deeper level, right? We get these little hits of information in this economy that we live in, economy of attention. Like, oh, I got it. We're like gathering all of these superficial berries, right? And versus you could take a look at one berry, and you could take a look at, I don't know if you've ever been on mushrooms before. But when I was on mushrooms, I got to tell you, you look down at a flower petal and you can see it evolving. And you just take a look at it and you keep staring at it, and you can go deeper and deeper. And you can spend all this time just looking at one flower, right? Where that flower exists the whole time. But we could run through the forest. And yes, we've seen everything, but we haven't really seen the depth. It's a lot of surface and not a lot of depth, right? And that's why I think sometimes the truth seekers, they get a lot of surface knowledge, right? But they don't sink down into it. That's why I love seeing masters using common tools in uncommon ways, right? They can go super deep into the process.
So because you're speaking into two different things. There's the concept of it, and then there's the experience of it. To me, life is meant to be experienced. So until I tell you, oh, this orange, this tastes amazing, and you never tasted an orange, like, it doesn't matter what I tell you about the orange, you never experienced it. Yeah. Right. And so life, that's why when we go through our pain, until you go through the pain, you will never, like, we'll just blame our parents for it.
Yep. Well, and one thing
go ahead.
I've experienced this so much with what I do, because I build virtual reality applications. It's called experiential blindness, right? Experiential blindness. You are blind to the experience. Like, unless you've tried virtual reality, I could say all these things to you. If it's amazing, you put a headset on, your mind's blown, all that fun stuff. But until you try the actual experience, you don't know, because the best thing I can do is use my words and use my stories. And there's a loss of data, right? So much information I'm sending out of my experience doesn't always land. If you watch an amazing movie and you watch whatever it is, Infinity Wars, you're like, movie was good, right? That's all you get. You didn't watch the 23 movies leading up to that. There's so much data that's lost inside of that. You had the experiential blindness. And so there's one thing to understand the concept, but what you're talking about is deeply understand the experience. Meditation, great example. Someone can meditate for 5 minutes with their eyes closed. Yes, they've done meditation, but it's not the same level as meditation as if you do it every single day for 40 years. And on that, year number 40, you meditate for 5 minutes or whatever it might be. There is a refined depth to that of the experience that's not the same. So even though you have the experience, it's not the same depth.
Well, I mean, Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect, is probably one of my favorite books because it really speaks about, I mean, it's the little things we do, the little things that we don't do, but we are the result of the compound effect of our habits. And so, you know, that's why, like, even yesterday morning when I woke up depressed, I was actually happy. I was like, great. That's kind of so funny, right? I'm happy that I'm depressed. Right?
Yeah, come on,
Yes.
I got some. I have something about that, but please go on. Please go on.
No, so it's just it's because my freedom is on the other end of that pain. My power comes from my pain.
Yeah,
And
totally.
you know, it's, and even like my wife, my partner to be, we're gonna get married next year. We even had a huge blowout like a couple of weeks ago. As we're doing, like, so we're doing the subconscious work, and most people are like, oh, we do the work, it's fixed, like I'm fixed. No, it's actually, that's when actually everything just starts to show up. It's
I have a great example about this. I've gotta share this. So
please.
I don't you know, I occasionally smoke marijuana here and there. I'm not smoking it right now, right? It's amazing in small doses for creativity and things, but then I can get a slippery train and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop. But one of the best things that I've ever did was I smoked weed at some point, right? And you know that, I don't know if you ever get that nervous anxiety energy that pops up for you when you smoke weed and you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I then started journaling like crazy. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because before I'm like a rocking chair, there's no place to put the energy. But then when I smoked it, it bubbled all these weird insecurities to the surface. And then I dived into it by journaling, and it was like a place to go. And then everything dropped, because instead of me resisting it, I started focusing and paying attention to and going, what's coming up for me? What's coming up for me? What's coming up for me? And I could write that all out. And then I was like, and it drained the energy out. And then it was really fun, because then I knew if that thing came up for me, I had a pattern of behavior that I could lean into that would then serve me. And I was like, this is amazing. I went from resistance to embracing, which was a very cool experience.
Well, my resistance is actually that's where my work is. And so the resistance is a great barometer. If you're like, well, I don't know, I'm not like, what should I like? What am I not processing? Well, what are you resisting? Like, because that right. So
but I want to talk about that.
I'm not resisting, but people resist resistance too. So it's so funny. Like me, for example, like one of my challenges, you know, building businesses and being an entrepreneur, is structure, organization. I resist that because it's like boring. It doesn't excite me. Anyway, I started doing this process with myself. All of a sudden, I'm freaking writing spreadsheets. I'm excited. I'm reorganizing my closet. Like, I'm like doing things because my brain is all of a sudden craving this masculine, like stability, like organization and structure. And if you start looking, like, masculine is like the house, the feminine is like the energy that dances within it. So if I don't have a container, it's very easy for me to just be like, woohoo, like I'm just going to fly all over the place. And then, you know, build, destroy, things get like all kinds of messed up. But if I'm too rigid and I'm too structured and I don't have this creativity flowing within me, it's not even so much of like, what do I want this moment to be? It's like, what is this moment calling forth? And as I come back to wholeness, right? As I'm whole, I can actually respond to life in a much more powerful way.
Yeah. And I think about that in terms of creativity. A lot of times they say that constraints create creativity, right? So if you have a constraint, you can then be creative within that constraint. The worst thing is like a white page. We could build anything. What do you want? Right. But if I said, hey, we're gonna be writing a book, we're gonna be working on the outline. We're gonna have to, the goal for today is to really just make the outline, and we've got 30 minutes to do it. Ready, set, go. Way more constraints. You can be creative in that space, i.e., you make that masculine house, you create the structures of that, and then you dance inside of that. I sometimes think about being both the dungeon master and the player in the game of life. And so you've got to be able to switch to making the rules and then playing the rules in a creative space. Otherwise, you'll wander off into the woods and get lost. And it just doesn't, you need a balance of those two elements, which I feel I never thought about as masculine and feminine. I thought about in those other styles. So it does resonate with me when you say that.
Well, it's interesting because all of us have like this inner critic within ourselves. So so I talked about the wounded feminine, and you also have the wounded masculine. Wounded masculine is controller, overthinker, overachiever. Overachiever, actually, we celebrate that, right? Those are workaholics.
Progress.
Progress. I mean, But the challenge is with that wounded masculine, people aren't staying still enough to process their emotions. I was doing this process the other day with this woman. She just got cancer. And how she resolved her problems was she was a doer. And she just did herself to death, to the point where, because we have cortisol running through our bodies, think if you're in a stress fight or flight situation, you're just trying to do. Your body eventually, if you don't resolve it, it's going to resolve you. Yeah. And so, when we teach ourselves how to breathe and how to actually calm our systems down, we notice where the inner critic lies, because that critic is actually, it's a lie. It's a lie based off of something that I was taught that wasn't necessarily true, but I made it true. And then I continuously reinforce it, the illusion of it. And now all of a sudden I'm caught in that loop.
And what's funny about that is that when we want to learn a skill set, if we want to grow, if we want to develop some sort of skill set, right? The way that we do that is we kind of let ourselves happen through the experience. We feel that situation out through feelings. But the challenge is that inner critic shuts down the ability to learn, because you're too busy telling yourself a story about the thing, and you're not actually embracing the moment for what is, right? That sometimes some people are afraid I want to do a live, but I'm so afraid of doing a live that I won't ever go on, because this inner critic is in my brain talking to me about this. But if you can shut down that inner critic and have a conversation, then you can really absorb so much better, be so much better, do so much. You can actually grow to get to where you want to go. And while the critic is trying to be helpful, trying to keep you safe, it's really stopping you from embracing the moment and embracing if you are failing, or if you are struggling, or if you are anything, just being in that moment. We talked about the moment is the gift. It's trying to serve you, but it's doing it in a way that actually is limiting you. It's almost like a coping mechanism to progress.
Yeah, well, it's blocking. It's actually, a lot of our resistance comes from our own judgments. So it's like, I'm right about the situation. There's no openness for possibility, because maybe if I'm wrong, then actually I could actually transform myself, right? So, there's also, we can access champion powers to overcome our critics. Like, so for example, like one of my critics is the avoider. Right, which is perfect for addiction. Like, I just avoid confrontation, avoid problems, just give me something to make me feel good. But the champion power for the avoider is courage. So anytime I'm avoiding something and I have the courage to actually face it, then I can actually start teaching myself the opposite to be true. So then all of a sudden, anytime, you see what I'm saying? Like, you start to access different parts of yourself. You don't allow your critic to win.
It's when you feel one thing, for example, generally speaking, when you feel pain, you might avoid it. That's the typical pattern, right?
Totally.
Versus the people that make it that transform themselves, when they feel pain, they lean into it. They use that fear as a compass to move towards something versus away from it. They're talking about avoiding and courage and all that, which makes a lot of sense with what you're talking about. I do want to jump back to something, because I feel like you got through it, but I don't know if you put a bow on the end of it. So I want to double back to it. You talked about this process, about stepping through this process. And first is awareness. Okay, this is awareness of the situation, and recognizing. Then you talked about accepting the situation. And then you went to the story about the cup being full. I'm not too sure if you actually went through and completed the conversation as we went back to it. Can you please kind of summarize what you were talking about with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 4-step process, I'll kind of just give you the whole thing, which is, first is identifying the limiting thought or belief, right? There's 7 of them. So there's all these stories that come along with each of these limiting core beliefs. And then once you identify them, then you can empty the cup. Then you got to clear it. You have to, this law of sequencing, if you do not clear the cup, you're just going to be putting a lot of stuff on your subconscious that's not going to accept it. So you got to go in. And the way that we do this is there's some breathing techniques. There's something called cross-hand breathing, which actually helps to neutralize you. So if you think of yourself, we're like batteries. We're positive and negative charges, right? Palm my hand, positive charge, back my hand, negative charge. There's a doctor, his name is Dr. Burr, and he actually had an instrument that would test our organs. So like, for example, like our liver, top of the organ's negative, bottom of the organ's positive. So our emotions are positive and negative as well. But when you do something called cross hand breathing, which you cross the meridians and you go tongue up to the roof, negative charge, tongue down, positive charge, all of a sudden, and you cross your left over right leg, you bring yourself back to neutral. And so when you bring yourself back to neutral, you can start preparing your body energetically. And then you do a grounding process. And then we do some alternate nostril breathing, which we harmonize the right and left brain. So then because there's Dr. Joe talks about, you could prune away the old neural synapses when, what fires together, wires together. But if you see, the thing is, when you have the experience, you no longer have that energetic charge. Mm-hmm. You have the experience. It no longer is necessary.
So now you're hacking your internal mind state or your nervous system.
You're preparing yourself with your body, with breathing. Yeah.
Using your physiology to affect your psychology through this type of state. Okay.
Yeah. So with the alternate nostril breathing, you bring in oxygen directly up into the neocortex. You're preparing your mind. So then you can go into those deeper states. You're preparing yourself to go into your subconscious. Right now, my conscious mind is in resistance to my subconscious because I don't want to deal with the pain. So you got to energetically prepare yourself to do so. So then once you prepare yourself, then you go into this exercise with the healing basket and you let it go. You go into the experiences, you release them. And then there's something called pledge of acceptance. Now you repattern. There's a repatterning spot right next to your heart. There's a bundle that we have like different pressure points. I think there's like 14 different pressure points in our body. There's one next to your heart. And then you go into, I deeply and fully accept myself. You go into what's called your code of joy. And so I deeply so my big story for I'm unworthy caused a lot of problems with money because I'm not worthy. I continuously, even when I made money, I still gave it away and I would destroy crazy stories that, happen because of that. But once you go into the repatterning, then there's another part of the process where now you could go into Dr. Joe Dispenza, feeling your future and going into the future of what now you're ready, you're fertile ground. And then the last part is anchoring. And so it's almost like a hypnosis of sorts. Mm-hmm. So because you were hypnotized when you were a little kid, right? We still have access to all of that, but none of us are taught how to do these things. So once you start to practice and integrate this process into your daily routine, next thing you know, and you're living from a place of I'm not worthy, but I am worthy. It's interesting how just one little word can completely transform your life. Right? Mm-hmm. Languages are spells, language is technology. So once you believe like I am worthy, oh my gosh, like my reality just starts to completely transform. Yeah. But it takes time. It's not going to happen. These things, take time. So most people want instant gratification and most people want the magic pill.
Yeah, give me a pill. It's way easier. I don't want to take this long effort kind of road.
Right. But that's why Xanax is a multi-billion-dollar business, but meditation's free.
And there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? You feel like you can you can hack something, you can get past something, and maybe you can have a little bit here, but it has that compounding effect of habits, both good and bad. Reflecting back, just so I can understand it a little bit, you had a physiology priming, right? Yeah. And then you have
then you empty the cup, you have the clearing. So you have identifying, you go to the big, so it calls this guy, Dr. Pratt, calls them asteroid strikes. So anytime you had a situation happen that was like when you were a little boy, little girl, and it hits your consciousness, it creates what's called a fog of distress. This fog of distress clouds your perception. And now all of a sudden, like, so for example, like if one of my clients, like his father used to yell at him to take out the garbage, he was scared. So his limiting thought that he came from was, I'm not safe. So what happens when you start to believe I'm not safe? You start creating other situations where you're not safe, and you just keep reflecting that back. Now life is going to show you, and it's going to try to actually do its best to reflect back to you, to wake you up to it. But if you're in resistance to it and you refuse to learn the lesson, this is when Groundhog Day happens, and you just keep keep dating the same people. We date our parents. We did, it's
survival patterns, man.
Yeah.
And you notice that if you get into a relationship, you break up with that relationship, you get into another relationship, you have the same problems because you are bringing your own problems to the next state. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try this one more time and see if I can get through this whole thing. Psychology priming, right? You then become awareness, you move through the basket. Then you have after you have the basket, you then move into
repatterning,
and then you have anchoring.
And then you anchor. Yeah. There's a process I take you through to help to anchor all of these things and deep into your subconscious, even to where you're like, so you put your hand on your forehead and so your subconscious is at the cerebellum is in the back of your brain connected to your spine. And so, because our minds, they drift. right? So it's very easy. Like you have these moments of genius and you might have these great epiphanies, but if you don't write that stuff down or you don't anchor it in, it's just going to be come in one day and then just leave the next.
Yeah,
So you really want to anchor because we've anchored in the pain, we've anchored in the problems. Now you want to anchor in the good stuff, but you don't anchor that stuff in until you actually clear out the cup.
Yeah, you got to make those grooves. First, become aware of it, prime yourself to be in the right state for it, then accept it and release it so you don't fight it. And then you're going to go through and be able to actually anchor it, and so that you're repatterning yourself. So every time, oh, I'm feeling pain, good. I'm going to go, I feel depressed, good. Yeah. I feel this situation, good. And you're going to be moving towards that situation.
Well,
I love it.
And there's even something else that, because I was listening to binaural beats and like theta wave states while I was doing this process, but a buddy of mine that I talked to, it's called Mind Trainer Pro. Anyway, he gave me access, and I'm going to start integrating this because I started doing it myself. But there are these frequencies that can actually help to heal our brains and to make them whole. So it's like anti-stress, anti-depression. And the other morning yesterday when I was super depressed, I listened to it, and all of a sudden it's just like the frequencies just like completely accelerated the process. So there's so much technology out there. The point is to actually just like take the time to actually utilize it. Yeah.
And building your own pattern that works for you. And
right. Everyone's got their own journey and figure out what works best for them. Absolutely.
100%. And so bringing it through, you have this coaching program that you do, this 4-step process. Is there anything else you're doing along to create this new earth? Are there other activities you're engaged in, other endeavors? Is there anything about that?
Yeah, well, so I think originally when we were having a conversation was talking about bow homes, which is these self-sustainable technology homes that are round that. So when COVID hit, I was living in Miami, Florida for 18 years, and I was living on the beach and just like living my dream life. I kite surf and I could just literally walk across the street. And all of a sudden, God, spirit, source, whatever, was like, Aaron, it's time to go. And I was like, really? I'm pretty happy here. Like, what is it? Do I really want to leave this life? And so sure enough, my girlfriend and I gave away all my stuff, and I was living in this condo for 13 years, and we bought a 33-foot toy hauler, and I set sail, and my intention was to go create the new earth, go look for land, self-sustainability. And I found myself in California. And I was actually going to California when everyone was like leaving California, right? Because COVID was a very interesting time. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of chaos happening. But anyway, I was out there and I met this guy. His name is Raphael. And he had this concept of building, they're called bow homes, building optimization worldwide. And they're self-sustainable, off-grid homes. But it's very similar to what like Tesla did for the car, which is they built this Roadster, tested it out. But like it's really just a golf cart with a battery and like a cool shell. So we wanted to do something similar in the housing market. So these homes, you could put them in hurricanes, you could put them in Tornado Alley, and it's such a simple structure. And there hasn't been a redesign in the home and housing industry. I mean, since we came and settled here. And the boxes are not natural. Boxes, first of all, in California, Raphael, he built like 300 homes. He's a volunteer firefighter. So they burned down immediately. Yeah. These homes will not burn down because you could have water recycled around them. And so anyways, it's kind of very interesting because I was this lead distributor for this superfood and mushroom company, and I was distributing them, and then all of a sudden that kind of just dissipated. I lost a team of 1,000 people, and all of a sudden it opened up the space for bow homes to be birthed, which is the beginning of this year. And so we launched it. We're launching our first project in Joshua Tree. We want to launch 12. We're actually going to launch 12 projects, 8 here in the United States. So places like Zion, Sedona, highly desirable places for people to want to go to. And we're doing it a different way where you don't even have to come out of pocket. We're doing something what's called stacked financing. So we're revolution. We're not getting venture capital money. We found a process, this company out of Arizona, based on your credit. You have good credit, you can get business loans. So it's not even against your personal credit. You can get, instead of like $10,000, $20,000 where you go get 5 credit cards, these guys can get you like $150,000, $200,000. So then we're taking money from the credit, building the assets, and then we're going to refinance them, pay off the credit, and then we're just going to roll it into the next deal. So, and there's 0% financing. So there's no, interest on it for the first like 12 to 24 months. So we're in the process of doing this, and dude, we're calling it Mars on Earth. So like, Raphael, he used to work with Tesla, and he launched Solar City in Southern California. So we're all about self-sustainability, off grid, but these homes cost a lot of money to build. Like I've been in real estate for 18 years, and the problem is labor a lot of times. So it takes 9 months, 12 months. So these homes, you can build them 30, 60 days. We can build them, but they're super freaking cool homes. And we can build them in Costa Rica. We can build them all over the freaking planet. And the great thing about it is like it's affordable, and you can join the Bow buyers list for free. And then eventually when we launch it to the public, they're going to be worth money. So if anyone is interested in them, that's my like side project. That's my passion project, is to help people reprogram their subconscious beliefs so they can really truly live who they are. And then the real estate stuff is just something we have amazing transformation. Like it's not just about making money and being profitable. It's about building community. The people that we have that are coming into this space are incredible. We're all about just like fucking doing it, dude. Just transforming the world and not having to worry about all the nonsense that's going on out there.
Yeah, and when we first talked about this, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this. So one thing's about helping people with their internal mindsets and beliefs and getting them to take action on things that they know to create a better social interaction with each other. I think,
Sure.
and by the way, yo, Josh, what's up, buddy? It's good to see you. Thanks for popping into the group and saying hi.
What's up, dude?
It's good to see you, brother. And so the other piece is, I think when people have certain resonations, you generally fall under certain patterns of behavior. So I would love to have a small group of friends who all live together in the same area, especially because we know that society, us inside cities and these areas, it doesn't feel like the way we should live. What we want to kind of feel is have a tribe of people in a kind of new modern way. And I love the concept of having, these high-end sustainable homes, places where a lot of people, your friends could all live, other people could live, where it's all kind of, it's self-sustainable, it's modern, it's up to date, it's redesigned, it's rethought about that. And same thing that Elon did with the Teslas and those, same thing he did with the space industry as well. Everything, they had old computer systems, 1960s computer systems in those spaceships, and they've now rockets. They now have modernized it. So what I love about that is taking I kind of feel myself in two areas. One, I love high-end technology, virtual reality, high-end, as crazy technology. You can get biofeedbacks and all the other things. I'm all about that. Same time, I love sitting by a campfire with my friends. I love doing those type of things. Those things are really fun. So blending those two things together to me really is very inspiring, and saying, how do we take what works in the old modern ways of us being connected, and how do we bring that with the new technologies in the modern world? And that's what I think you're doing with these bow homes, and what I thought was amazing about it. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about it and kind of give you just a little chance to communicate what's going on and why you're passionate. Because I feel if you're in that same type of space, you figure out, how do I reinvent everything about myself, who I am, where I live, what do I do, the people I'm with, and how do I change the environment that I surround myself, both my internal and my external. So I think it's really cool, the thing that you're doing with that.
No, I appreciate it. It's and we talk about it every morning. We have our 9 a.m. calls, and they're not just like normal like calls. We talk about this. Like it's like amazing to think that, the leaders of this planet, the people that I believe that are going to truly transform the planet are the ones that have the courage to really hold that vision and draw the future in, right? And that's really challenging to do if we're stuck to our past. But like nature, right? Nature is just the ultimate technology. And we have all this other, look at how fast life is accelerating, right? Like to me, COVID was a huge wake up. It was just like, basically like, guys, wake up. Like it's time, right? It's time to create something different. And, old systems, to me, the collapsing of other things and the death and rebirth are, to me, synonymous. So it's like, what can we create where we can get to have it all with regards to, community, to our health, to how we live, to how we're interacting with one another. And I think it would be nothing cooler than to just have a cool fucking house with cool fucking people doing cool fucking shit. Like,
that's great. It sounds like a great tag for the website. I think you should put that up.
It does.
Man.
We say it's we'll make a cool effing home. We didn't say fucking, but we did put effing. That came in our branding script. Because we're like, it's just a cool fucking house. Like, what the fuck?
It's great. Well, as as we create new solutions to old problems, we invent new problems. You can't invent the ship unless you invent the shipwreck. You can't complete the airplane unless you complete the airplane crash. So if you invent a solution to an old problem, you create a new problem. What I love about that is we created a solution to us being able to work together, and that was cities. And there's some problems that come along with this. What I like about that is we're now reinventing it. You're reinventing the new way that we can live together, right? Which will probably have some new problems on the way, but it's going to get rid of these other issues of us being isolated, us not being sustainable, us not being all the things that we know to be true, but we don't have an easy path to get there. And that's part of what technology is. Technology creates, it magnifies our intent. And it makes it easier for us to do what we intended to do in a better way. Meaning you could have this conversation in person by a campfire, but instead we're doing this online over an online space, which is just magnifying the intent of our communication. And that's what I like about what you're doing is you're trying to solve this problem that we all know to be true, but you're creating a pathway using this technology.
Yeah, technology is just a way to accelerate what it is that we're already, and so it just depends on how do we use the technology, right?
Yeah.
And so the people like with the intent, our intention is really that like how we started the conversation is to create the new earth. And the new earth is whatever we make it. Like it's whatever we come together, and it's not a set thing, right? So it's a constant evolution of who we are. And that's the exciting part about it, right? And that's why I'm really like Joshua Tree just being as the first destination. I just can't wait to come out there and actually, meet you in person, see you in person, but also, you guys get to like experience these things. Yeah. And we're just going to do it in, we're going to do it in the coolest places, Zion, Sedona, Costa Rica, different just locations. And why not?
100%. Oh yeah, I got that contact for you. I'll share with you after this.
Okay.
Joshua Tree. That's something we talked about. But to bring that on home with what we're talking about, New Earth and all that, what is your holy grail for all the things that you're doing with the YOUniversity and the New Earth and what you're doing with the Bow Homes? What is the flag in the sand that you hope to achieve by all the effort that you're putting into this life?
Wow, that's a great question. So, my intention is for all of us to be able to really tap into who we truly are. And it's like, well, what's that mean actually? And so what I envision, and I've had this vision since I was a little boy, is that we are this infinite love. And so, infinite love coming from a place of like full acceptance, unconditional love. So if you look at the Journey to Freedom formula, I'm in this other guy's group, and he talks about how it's like, first is awareness, right? Becoming aware is the first step to transformation. Then there's radical honesty with myself. And so having radical honesty with myself now gives me the ability to have radical honesty with you. So we're having a conversation now. We can be authentic. I could share with you. There's no shame. There's like the guilt and shame is still there, but I share anyway because I'm not going to let that stop me. So you have radical honesty of myself with you leads to self-acceptance, acceptance of all of myself, right? So that's who I am. Now I can actually deeply accept you as a human being. I before had it turned around. I would accept everybody else, but I wasn't accepting myself. That created a lot of pain in my life. So once you go through this formula, radical honesty, deep acceptance, now it leads to where this is my vision, unconditional love of myself, unconditional love of my fellow being. That is the portal to everything that we desire. As long as we're being radically honest and we're deeply and fully accepting ourselves and each other, that's where the new earth is born.
Which is like almost, when I think of it as the ultimate form of unity, is deeply loving myself and you as if we are one.
Yes. Yeah. It's cutting through the illusion. It's cutting through the disconnection. So to me, God is just connection. I am connected. Yeah.
So if that is the Holy Grail, what is the dragon that prevents us from attaining that Holy Grail?
Our resistance. Literally, it's our resistance to who we truly are. And it's believing the lie that was indoctrinated into me either by society's norms or by, some sort of past generational trauma that's just been. And this is what's interesting about the ultimate game of life. It's like whatever you guys believe to be true about God, source energy, to me, it's like, okay, I'm blessed to be here in this body, right? Having this experience called life. So what am I going to choose to do with it? To me, it's about, as we evolve consciousness, I do it within myself, gives the next person the better opportunity. So when I say I have kids and I deeply and fully accept myself, now that's the best gift I can give my child, is by deeply fully accepting and loving myself. Now I can deeply fully accept and love that baby. Imagine we started doing the compound effect of that, starting inside instead of going outside of ourselves. The world will become like, whether you believe you come back into this life, or, we haven't even talked about, like, aliens and spirits and all that kind of stuff. But,
We missed it.
I truly believe death is an illusion, right? Like, this body, because when I was using heroin and my best friend died and he was 19. Okay. And I went out and I flew out to Salt Lake City to identify his body. I was 24, and my ex partner was Mormon, and it was interesting because the parents were like, they couldn't even speak at the funeral, and I was just shooting heroin with them like a week before, and I felt guilty because I told him to move out to Salt Lake to clean himself up, and then he died. So I felt guilty and ashamed that I told my best friend to go out there, my girlfriend's brother, who we grew up together. And so when I went and I identified his body down in the morgue and I saw him, this is the first time I really understood. I'm like, holy fuck, we are not our bodies. It was like looking at a suit. It was like looking at just something that was inanimate. And I was like, that's not, I don't know where my friend is, but that he's not there.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I fully understood, like, there's something beyond what I can see or feel or touch. And this is where I believe we are just reincarnating ourselves until we finally get it. Until some of us get it. The challenge is everyone's in resistance to it. And so they destroy the person that gets it because they're in fear of it, because the fear is like, they don't even know what love is because they never really experienced it. They're sitting in those lower frequencies of shame, guilt, fear, because they don't even know what the experience of love is. So then what do? We reject it. We resist it. We actually ostracize it. Yeah. So it's a very interesting game that we play.
I love that. I completely resonate with that, because when I've seen, gone to like family funerals, I've seen like my father's body. I've seen these bodies, and they just seem, that's not the person. It seems empty, right? There's an emptiness in it.
It's a shell.
Yeah,
it
feels
like a suit.
Yeah, which is a radical, and it's interesting because we are so insulated in life. We have everything prepackaged, right? Prepackaged meats, prepackaged. We don't ever really see death, so we don't really come to terms with it because we've been insulated from it. Somebody else does the dirty work, and then we experience what life is. Unless you live on a farm or you're in other places, where you don't really get a chance to see that cycle of life. We only see one half, like the Disneyland version of it, but we really don't see, what happens. And so it's an interesting concept about the death and rebirth, and kind of almost like, in order to cycle through it, you would need to solve the generational traumas that you have and that other people have had before you in order to kind of pass on and move through.
That's the work.
Yeah.
So many of us are rejecting the darkness, and so many of us are resisting the darkness. But what we forget is that we are the darkness. We are the light and the darkness. I have the same ability, like Hitler. If you look at Hitler, he was a reflection of our own consciousness. The only reason why Hitler was successful is because the people believed what he was doing was true. Right?
Happened with the deep fear, primal blame, shame, guilt, and then rallied a nation.
They just rallied around it out of fear.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how much time we have. I have one more quick story I could share with you just to kind of illustrate. One of the biggest, most painful experiences I had when I was deep in my addiction in like 2010. I just got married and I was playing poker every single day. And I partnered with this guy. His name is Renegade Fox, XXX, FOXXX. You could check him out. Big, huge black dude. Anyway, I partnered with him because I thought I was going to become a millionaire. And I gave him all my money, and I gave him all my friends and family's money. It was like 26 of us. And it ended up being like a scam Ponzi scheme. And so it was this Christmas time. And I found out he took like $1 million from this other woman, another $500,000 from somebody else. So anyway, I started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and I started like cleaning up my life. And my ex-wife was drinking 24 beers a day, and I was living in a lot of chaos. But about 6 months later, on a Sunday, like God was like talking to me and said, "Get up, Aaron, just get up." And I was like, "Okay, what do you want me to do, God?" And God, it was like, "Go to this Al-Anon meeting," because I was going to Al-Anon meetings to deal with like I wanted my ex-wife to stop drinking, but I needed to stop. It didn't. It's so funny how these things work out. Anyway, so I go to the meeting, and nothing's happening, and it's like the meeting's ending, and I'm driving home, and God's like, I'm driving by this church, and God's like, go into the church. And like my past is like, I don't believe in church. I don't believe, because I didn't like, I was brought up like with that, all those belief systems. I was like, why? And I started questioning. I was like, no, why would I do that? And it was so loud. I was like, go into the church. And I was clear enough to be like, you know what? I'm going to listen. So I walk into the church, and who's sitting in the back row of the church? Renegade Fox. The scam artist. He's sitting in the back of the freaking church. I'm like, what the on my mind, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? I'm tripping out now, right? So I go sit next to him, and I'm like, dude, what the hell are you doing here? And he goes to me, he's like, yo, man, he's like, last week I had this spirit come in, start strangling me. He's like, I'm trying to find God. And I shit you not, I started thinking, I was like, oh my God, he's like, is this guy scamming me again? Like, this is a really good scam artist, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of just like, just like in shock. And so anyway, the pastor starts going into his sermon. And so the pastor starts telling our freaking story. He starts going like, I know there's a guy out here, he's a scam artist. I know he took all this money, did all these things. And I'm like, wait a second. I was like, this guy's got to talk to him, right? And so I went up to the pastor after he spoke, and I was like, hey, did this guy tell you his story? He goes, no, that was God. God was channeling this through me. And so Renegade goes to me. His real name is Wayne Carswell. He actually ended up going to jail 10 years later. But anyway, so he goes to me, goes, hey, he goes, do you want to get baptized with me in the ocean next week? And so where I lived at the time in Miami, I lived on 76th and Collins. There's an old Native American burial ground right across. And I never knew this. I was just always drawn to this area. The Bermuda Triangle comes into Miami. It's supposed to come into this park. And the Native Americans, they knew something was special about this place. So anyway, I was like, you know what? This is the first moment I took responsibility for what had happened. I was like, he didn't steal the money from me. I gave him the money. There was this deep, and what happened was, because of this deep pain that was within me from all my traumas from when I was a kid, I had to create something so significant and so intense to wake me the fuck up. This is the problem. If we don't resolve our traumas, they'll wake us up regardless, eventually. And so I said, you know what? So I was like, I'm going to forgive this guy, and I'm going to get baptized with him. I'm going to actually let him go. And so when I got home, my wife was like, where were you? I was like, oh yeah, I saw Renegade Fox in church. And she's like, what, did you kill him? And I was like, no, I'm going to get baptized with him in the ocean next week. And she's like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? She's like, what is wrong with you? Anyway, that marriage ended up not working out. There's a lot of other stories about that, but
wow, man, that's incredible. Yeah. But there's that anger, that rage, that blame, that I've noticed it with myself, is it's a anchor that holds us down. And when you can forgive and let go and accept the people for who they are, there's a lightness that comes over you. That lightness comes over me when I just say, you know what, whether they did me wrong or not, there is a piece of me that's on me for that. And when I accept responsibility for myself for the situation, it opens up the heart, and it creates this, versus the armor that covers the heart from trying to protect ourselves from the world around us. So that's a beautiful thing. Way to bring that on home. I love that, and I appreciate that. With that being said, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
I think, well, first of all, I appreciate you, just having this space and for us to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And, you asked me originally when we first got on, like, what am I hoping to get out of this conversation? And really what it came to me, I said a prayer was to serve the highest good, right? To serve the highest good of anyone that's listening to this conversation, and have people understand, like, it doesn't matter where you come from, or the pain that you're in, or the pain that's even to come. We always have the ability to face this pain and to resolve it within ourselves. And it's taken me 47 years of being on this planet to understand that actually the pain is a part of the process. It's just a part of, and the sooner I accept it and love it and appreciate it, the more fuller of a life I can actually have and live instead of resisting. Because otherwise I could just live half a life. And how many of us, are going into the grave, dying and wishing that we had done something different. And that's not going to be me. I don't think that's going to be you either. So.
Yes, songs of quiet desperation,
Yeah. It's no bueno.
No bueno.
So,
I love it. That's beautiful. Pain is part of the process. And with all of that being said, how do people get a hold of you?
So if you're interested in the Bow Homes, just go to BOWWHOMES, bowhomes.com. You can sign up for free for the buyers list. If you're interested in doing the stacked financing, just watch the videos and just set a calendar date with me, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. We are giving some shares to Boho Manufacturing for the first group of investors, which is, a huge opportunity with no money down. And then also, you can go to my Instagram, which is my initials, which are Aaron You Mastny, AYM, and then _ you, YOU. So it's literally my initials are IMU. I don't know. I was born with that name, so I don't know whatever it means, but or just Aaron You Mastny on Facebook, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you if you're interested in this 4-step process. I will tell you this: I've got this I've just been doing with a lot of different people. I am giving a guarantee where I'll do the process with you, and if you don't get the results that you're looking for, don't worry about it. The price is free.
Beautiful. That's a great guarantee.
Yeah, guarantee.
Beautiful. Aaron, thank you so much for your time, brother. I really appreciate you coming on, rapping with me. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I'll see you on the other side.
Look forward to it, brother. Thank you so much.
Take care now.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you